August 2nd, 2014, instructor Stephen Hilder was about to take a student on a tandem skydive over Peterborough, England. 41 years old, with over 10,000 jumps under his belt, Hilder was considered one of the most experienced skydivers in the country. His student that day was 25-year-old Adrian Hansen, a first-time jumper excited to cross skydiving off his bucket list. They boarded the aircraft along with several other jumpers and ascended to 14,000 feet. The weather was perfect, clear skies, minimal wind, ideal jumping conditions. At 14,000 feet, the door opened. One by one, jumpers exited the plane. Hilder and Hansen, strapped together in tandem configuration, shuffled toward the door. Hilder ran through his mental checklist like he'd done thousands of times before. Everything seemed normal. They jumped in. For the first 50 seconds, the free fall was flawless. They plummeted toward Earth at terminal velocity, around 120 miles per hour. Hansen was experiencing the rush of his life. Hilder maintained perfect body position, keeping them stable as the ground rushed up to meet them. At approximately 4,000 feet, Hilder reached back to deploy the main parachute. This is where everything went wrong. The main chute deployed, but immediately began spinning violently. Skydivers call this a malfunction, and it's exactly why reserve parachutes exist. Hilder should have cut away the main chute and deployed his reserve immediately, but something stopped him. Witnesses on the ground reported seeing the tandem pair spinning rapidly under a malfunctioning canopy, descending far too quickly. For reasons that remain unclear, Hilder never deployed the reserve parachute. They hit the ground at devastating speed. The impact killed Hilder instantly. Hansen somehow survived initially, though with catastrophic injuries, he died at the hospital hours later. Investigators spent months trying to understand why an instructor with Hilder's experience failed to execute basic emergency procedures. The main parachute malfunction was survivable. The reserve chute was functional. Hilder simply never pulled it. The inquest revealed something disturbing. Hilder had been experiencing severe personal stress, financial problems, relationship issues, mounting pressure. Some investigators theorized he may have deliberately chosen not to deploy the reserve. Others suggested he became disoriented during the malfunction and made a fatal decision error. The truth died with him, but one thing is certain. Hansen trusted his life to an expert, and that expert failed him in the most catastrophic way possible. But at least Hilder and Hansen died on impact. Imagine falling from thousands of feet and surviving long enough to comprehend what's happening. April 4th, 2005, Canadian skydiver William Reyes was jumping with friends at Skydive Paris in California. 38 years old with moderate experience, Reyes had completed around 200 jumps. Nothing extraordinary, but enough to be considered competent. That day, he was jumping solo with his own equipment. The plan was simple: exit at 13,000 feet, freefall to 5,000 feet, deploy the parachute, and land safely. Reyes exited the aircraft and began his freefall. Everything appeared normal to other jumpers in the air. He maintained good body position and seemed relaxed. At 5,000 feet, he reached for his ripcord. The main parachute deployed without issue. But as the canopy inflated above him, something went catastrophically wrong with the lines. The parachutes have suspension lines that connect the canopy to the harness. These lines must be untangled and properly routed for the parachute to function. In Reyes' case, the lines twisted severely during deployment, creating what skydivers call line twists. Mild line twists are manageable. Severe ones can be deadly. Reyes had severe ones. The twisted lines prevented his parachute from fully inflating. Instead of a stable canopy above him, he had a spinning, partially collapsed mess. He was still falling, just slower than freefall. Not slow enough. He had maybe 60 seconds to fix this before hitting the ground. The standard procedure is to kick your legs violently in opposite directions, using your body to untwist the lines. If that fails, cut away the main and deploy the reserve. Witnesses watched Reyes spinning under his malfunctioning parachute, clearly fighting to regain control. He managed to untwist some of the lines, but not all of them. His parachute was semi-functional, slowing his descent, but not enough. He was still coming down dangerously fast. At this point, he should have abandoned the main parachute and deployed his reserve, but there's a psychological trap that kills skydivers. It's called fixation. You become so focused on fixing the problem that you don't realize you've run out of altitude. Reyes never deployed his reserve. He hit the ground at approximately 40 miles per hour, enough to be survivable under different circumstances, but the angle of impact was wrong. He landed on his side, breaking multiple ribs and puncturing both lungs. The impact also caused severe internal bleeding and spinal damage. But here's what makes this case particularly horrifying. Reyes Reyes didn't die immediately. Witnesses rushed to him within seconds. He was conscious, breathing, though barely. Blood was pooling in his chest cavity, and every breath sent sharp fragments of broken ribs deeper into his tissue. He was fully aware of what had just happened and what was about to happen. Emergency medical personnel arrived within minutes, but there was nothing they could do at the scene. His injuries were too severe for field treatment. They loaded him into an ambulance and rushed him toward the nearest trauma center, but Reyes was fading fast. He died in the ambulance roughly 20 minutes after impact. 20 minutes of knowing he was dying because he hesitated 1 second too long. That's the cruel mathematics of skydiving accidents. One wrong decision, one moment of fixation, and you're gone. But Olympic athletes face their own version of this nightmare. The difference is they're not jumping out of planes by choice. They're pushed to physical extremes by systems that prioritize medals over safety. July 14th, 1912, Stockholm, Sweden. The temperature was climbing past 90 degrees with suffocating humidity. Portuguese marathon runner Francisco Lázaro was about to make a decision that would kill him. The 21-year-old carpenter had trained in Portugal's mild climate. Nothing prepared him for the furnace of asphalt and dust waiting in Stockholm. Before the race, Lázaro made what he thought was a smart move. He covered his entire body in a thick layer of beef fat and wax to protect against sunburn. What he actually did was seal his skin in a waterproof barrier that would prevent his body from cooling through sweat. He essentially turned himself into a pressure cooker. The race started at 1:45 in the afternoon, the worst possible time. 69 runners began the 26-mile course. Lázaro started conservatively, running alongside competitors from Sweden, Finland, and South Africa. The early miles passed without incident, but as they moved through the Swedish countryside, the sun climbed higher and temperatures kept rising. By the halfway point, several runners had already collapsed from heat exhaustion. Lázaro kept going. His breathing became labored. Sweat accumulated beneath the waxy coating but couldn't evaporate. His body temperature was climbing with no way to regulate itself. At the 18-mile mark, witnesses reported seeing him stagger. He appeared confused, disoriented. Classic symptoms of heat stroke. With just 5 miles remaining, Lázaro collapsed on the dusty road. Spectators found him unconscious, burning with fever. His skin was pale and clammy beneath the melted wax coating. Swedish medical personnel rushed him to the hospital, where doctors worked frantically to lower his body temperature, and he never regained consciousness. Lázaro died the following morning, becoming the first athlete to die during Olympic competition. His death led to mandatory water stations and temperature monitoring for marathon races. Small comfort for a 21-year-old who died chasing glory. February 12th, 2010, Whistler, Canada, Georgian luger Nodar Kumaritashvili was making his final practice run just hours before the Vancouver Winter Olympics opening ceremony. The 21-year-old had trained his entire life for this moment, following his father and uncle, who'd both represented Georgia in luge. The Whistler track was notorious, fastest and most dangerous in the world, with speeds regularly exceeding 90 miles per hour. During training weeks, several athletes had crashed. An Italian luger publicly criticized the track design, calling it too fast and dangerous. A Romanian racer suffered a concussion after losing control. At 4:44 in the afternoon, Kumaritashvili began his run. Lying on his back, he accelerated down the icy track. The first several turns passed normally as his speed increased. By the most challenging section, he was traveling approximately 90 miles per hour. Then something went wrong approaching turn 15. Video analysis showed his sled drifting left toward the outer wall. He attempted to correct by applying pressure with his right leg, but the adjustment came too late and too aggressive. His sled shot up the banking of turn 16, launching him into the air like a projectile. He was thrown from the sled at over 87 miles per hour, flying several yards before striking a steel support pillar. The impact caused massive trauma to his head and chest. Medical personnel reached him within minutes and attempted CPR, but the injuries were catastrophic. Kumaritashvili was pronounced dead at 5:50 in the evening, just hours before the opening ceremony. Track modifications were immediately implemented, including higher walls and padding around steel support. Another young athlete dead, another safety protocol written in blood. These aren't just tragic accidents, they're systemic failures dressed up as individual misfortune. The common thread isn't bad luck, it's pressure, expectation, and systems that value performance over human life. Whether it's a skydiver fixating, a malfunction, or an athlete competing in deadly conditions, the pattern repeats. Push harder, go faster, ignore the warning signs until it's too late. Every jump, every race, every run down that track carries the same unspoken bargain. You're betting your life that equipment works, that conditions hold, that your body doesn't fail when it matters most. Sometimes you lose that bet and there's no second chance to correct the mistake.